Hey there. I am the hairiest host who loves books the most. I am Silver Bear, and this is the sweetest little bear that was ever in there. That is Honey Bear, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I am still recovering from a bout of tonsillitis, so it is still a fair bit of a scratchy job for me to get through everything, but I'm going to do my best to push on through it. And today we're going to talk about something that's perhaps a little heavier than a few of the other books we've talked about so far on this channel. We're going to talk about Maus by Art Spiegelman. And this probably isn't going to take the form of a traditional book review because it doesn't really work that way. But I'm going to discuss this book as a teaching tool. I'm going to discuss this book as a graphic novel to be read. And then I'm going to talk about sort of the impact that it had on me. So for those of you that aren't aware of this, Maus by Art Spiegelman is a graphic novel retelling of a series of interviews that author Art Spiegelman did with his father, who was a survivor of the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. And he has then sat down, done these interviews with his father, and then turned them into a graphic novel where the Jews are characterized as mice, the Germans as cats, the French as frogs, and so on and so forth. And it is a true retelling of the experiences his father recounted to him, but presented in a way that is probably much more digestible than a traditional interview or documentary would have been. And as such, as a teaching tool, it becomes something that is very, very valuable, because so much of the experience of the Holocaust is something that, particularly as a teacher, students find really hard to grasp and believe. They sort of sit there in stunned silence as you talk about these horrendous events that occurred. And even when you show them video footage of somebody, it's kind of this older person and, normally with a thick European accent, and it can be really hard for them to fully latch on to the significance of what it is that is being discussed with them. And so as a teaching tool, Maus is, I believe, one of the absolute most accessible ways for students to connect with and understand the Holocaust. And it would be really easy for young people to become overwhelmed by this story. I've certainly had students for whom the discussions were beyond what they were probably emotionally prepared to engage with. And so this book, and I'll quickly show you, it'll probably be easier if I bring them up on the screen, but I'll see how that goes. This book makes the unbelievable digestible. And that's something that cannot be overstated in how significant and important that it is. You can look at films like Schindler's List, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and I know there's a whole lot of historical issues with that film and book, but is probably the novel that, or the film and novel that most kidify the concept in a way that is digestible for young people. But again, I feel like the historical issues in that are probably too much to look past if you're going to use it as a legitimate teaching tool. Whereas Maus by Art Spiegelman is something that any young person can absorb, and that is a real-to-life story that they're going to be able to connect with. I'm sorry, this is, I think I'm still a little bit over-medicated. So as a teaching tool, I find this absolutely phenomenal. It is a wonderful, wonderful tool. As a book to read in and of itself, Spiegelman has gone above and beyond in taking his father's stories and stitching them together in such a way that it forms a cohesive narrative, and it is still satisfying as a story in and of itself, not even withstanding the fact that sometimes the truth of history isn't always a clean and clear story. He's picked and chosen which stories he shares in such a way that it really is still a wonderful, wonderful narrative. emotionally, this story, if it doesn't grab you, if it doesn't hook you, if it doesn't hold you by the throat the whole time that you're reading it and force you to stare at this car crash of human misery and this absolutely mind-boggling story of epic survival amongst the worst conditions of humankind, then I don't think that you have a beating heart. It is harrowing, wonderful. It is something, a unique experience to itself. And I recommend, whether or not you're interested in history, whether or not the Holocaust is something that you want to understand more about, I think it's almost an obligation for us as human beings to do that. And for us to realize that the conditions that the Nazis implemented on the Jewish people in Europe at that time are not conditions that are unique and are not conditions that are impossible to replicate. If we do not understand this portion of history and how this happened, these things can and will and are happening again. So I think it's beyond a do you like it, do you not like it. I think this is the kind of story that we are at least somewhat obligated to endure. And I hate saying that because, books and obligation aren't meant to be in the same sentence, but it's a bit of the history teacher coming out in me where I can't help but feel that, there's a bit of human responsibility in us learning each other's stories like this. And I am looking forward to discussing in future installments other examples of stories like this that I think should be explored. And I would love in the comment section for people to tell me, what are the stories, experiences worldwide that you think that I should explore? That, this is a must read for understanding the human condition and human experience, like I believe this graphic novel to be. Editing Adam here. It would be remiss of me not to mention as well something that I forgot to discuss when I was doing the review, that Mouse also explores the interactions between Art himself and his father, because the framing device for his father's story is actually him illustrating the interviews that he did with his dad, and it allows us to see and explore the long-term impacts and after effects of these events on people well after they have happened. So it's not simply an exploration of what happened and the damage that can do. It is also an exploration of the after effects, the long-term lingering impact, the generational trauma that can be passed down from one generation to the next with human rights abuses like this. And that additional layer of exploration adds even more value to what is, I think, an already super valuable story. So I'm not going to belabor the point too much. Again, I'm still recovering from illness here. But Mouse by Art Spiegelman is, in my opinion, a 5-star masterpiece. It is wonderfully put together. It is an inspired piece of fiction, nonfiction? Yeah. Sorry, my brain went flat there. It is an inspired piece of nonfiction. It is an inspired piece of graphic novelry. It is so clever, so well put together, and I'm not going to guarantee you that you're going to have a happy time reading it, because you're probably not, but you are going to get something out of it, 100%. So, Mouse by Art Spiegelman. Have you read it? What did you think about it? And are there any other books that you would recommend that, again, make us understand and feel the human experience? Time to put Mouse on the shelf. Thank you very much. And Honey Bear, I'm afraid you are going to have to stay silent today because my throat hurts. Thanks, mate.